our webinar, Empowering Growth, Investing in Education and Upskilling India's Workforce for Tomorrow, organized as a part of our project Good and Better Jobs in India. As we stand at the threshold of India's new economic era, investing in education and upskilling the workforce is vital for ensuring India's sustainable growth and competitiveness in a rapidly evolving global market. Addressing the skill gaps and aligning workforce capabilities with industry demands will be essential in empowering individuals and fostering inclusive economic development across the country. We are fortunate to have with us a panel of esteemed speakers who will share their insights and perspectives on this critical issue. Today we have Dr. Samar Verma, who will be moderating the panel discussion. Dr. Verma is an accomplished professional with over 27 years of experience in grant management, policy analysis, and program leadership. He has held key positions at Ford Foundation and IDRC, driving initiatives on social justice, inequality, and capacity building across South Asia. He is also a renowned researcher, having influenced global development policies and contributed significantly to trade and economic justice. In the panel, we have Dr. Partha Pratim Mitra, former Principal, Labour and Employment Advisor to the Government of India. He brings over 35 years of expertise in labour, employment, and economic policy. He has also served as the Chief Economic Advisor in the Ministry of Rural Development. With a doctorate in law, his expertise spans corporate law, industrial relations, and rural development. Dr. Shashi Bala, Senior Fellow at the VV National Labour Institute with specialization in labour economics, skill development, and gender studies. She leads the Center for Gender and Labour Studies and has been instrumental in gender sensitivity and workplace equality initiatives. Trained by ILO, her work has contributed to several national and international projects on gender and decent work. Ms. Mandvi Kulshetra, an urbanist and feminist, currently working as a program advisor for socio-economic transformation at FES India. She specializes in climate change, urbanization, energy transition, and gender equality, designing national and regional projects on the future of work and socio-ecological transformation. And last but not the least, we have Ms. Sonal Jetli, Gender Equality and Social Inclusion Lead at the Microsafe Consulting, with over a decade of experience in women's financial inclusion and economic empowerment. Previously, she had led women's enterprise development programs at SIDBI and served at UN Women. She was also the chair at the Gender and Digital Economy Working Group for the G20 Ministerial Conference on the Women Empowerment in 2022. So before we dive into this fruitful session, here is to certain house announcements. Each panelist will be allotted 8 plus 2 minutes for presenting their views on the questions posed to them by the moderator. After our panelists have put forward their views, the floor will be open for an open discussion, which will include all the participants present with us today. We request all the panelists and presenters to kindly keep their videos on so that the discussion becomes much more engaging. We also request only the person who speaks to please turn on their microphone, and other participants are requested to kindly put their microphones off when not speaking to avoid any inconvenience. Lastly, participants having questions are requested to type the same in the chat box. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to a stimulating and productive discussion. Over to you, Sanchita ma'am.
Thank you, Tasmita, and welcome to our panelists and participants. Before we go into the actual panel discussion, I'll just give you a very brief background of what we are doing and why we are discussing this issue. CUTS International has been implementing a project which has a very long name. We call it Grow Jobs in short. The tagline is Good and Better Jobs in India. And mostly we've been talking about workers which have informalized kind of working arrangements, and we're talking about workers' welfare issues, say social protection measures and other labor conditions. And the objective of the project is to build a narrative on alternative model of economic growth where workers' welfare will be in a greater focus in, say, corporate strategies, in mainstream discussions. We are at the second phase of the project, in fact, almost at the end of the second phase of the project. And as part of the project, we've been organizing these monthly webinars for past several months, um, where through these webinars we are trying to build a discourse, contribute to the discourse, and we've been taking up some topical issues, which are not just being discussed widely, but also issues which we have come across through our research. We have studied several sectors, and we have looked at workers' welfare issues from different through different ways. At the moment, we are conducting two studies: one on ESG and workers' welfare, and one on gig workers' welfare. I just want to share with you very quickly, in a minute or so, some finding from this gig workers welfare study. Our team surveyed 500 gig workers in 5 states. 91% of these gig workers were below the age of 44 years, and 53% of them had passed secondary and high secondary, and 28% more bachelor's degree. And out of these gig workers, 75% felt that their employment with the gig companies are not using their skills, and their efforts are not being adequately compensated. So now, by gig work, we basically mean, delivery companies, or, drivers, delivery personnel, drivers. They need specific skills. But then, and definitely they do not need, we don't think they need like really higher level advanced university degrees. But even within them, this is the feeling. And what we feel that, what we've come across, that with increasing digitization, even among this sphere of workers, who use apps to get their jobs, they feel that they are not sufficiently aware of digital issues. They do not possess enough digital skills, say, to access government schemes. And also, with increasing use of technology, AI, and other forms of technology, their job conditions become more and more precarious. So I just wanted to share this with you. And this is the background of our choosing this topic today, where we are kind of, brought together different issues, because, we feel that, interlinkages of different disciplines is, something we should be talking about. And we would like to, hear from our panel on some of these issues, and we look forward to a very good discussion on this. I will not take any more time, because, we have our panelists waiting, and we have our very, very able moderator and an old friend of Cuts, Dr. Samar Verma. Samar, over to you for facilitating the discussion.
Thank you very much, Sanchita. Thank you very much, Smita. I truly appreciate your kickstarting the conversation on a very, just trying to frame the issue. First of all, I want to join hands with my colleagues from CUTS to welcome all the panelists, and there are very eminent panelists on this discussion, but also all the participants who we are all looking forward to engaging with. And in the interest of making sure that we have as much participation as is possible, I'm going to, with Tasmita's approval, request panelists to stick to no more than 5 minutes in their initial remarks. I will really appreciate that, so that we can have longer conversations with the wider participants, and there are many of them here. I just wanted to know, before we get into before I invite my panelists, I wanted to take the opportunity to just frame the conversation a little bit. So, we are talking about empowered growth, empowering growth. And for today's discussion, I would, as Sanchita pointed out, with some very interesting data findings, we would like to be focusing on empowering more than the growth itself. In some ways, that's also our nation's vision. That is also our collective future that we are aspiring to. And the question is, how do we achieve this future? Whenever I think of this, I'm reminded of a quote by somebody who said that the best way to predict the future is to create it. So I'm going to ask the panelists and, of course, the participants to think of ways in which we can create that future. And when we are thinking about creating that empowered Viksit Bharat in 2047, if I may put it that way, what we are also wanting to look at is how do we frame this conversation so that it becomes kind of meaningful. And thinking of empowerment, essentially there are, in the short run, empowerment essentially means skilling those who have missed the bus of education. So Sanchita talked about more than 70% of the people in the gig economy not having the necessary educational qualification. We know 93% of India's workforce belongs to informal sector, and majority of whom will belong to this category. But that's the short run. In the long run, we are looking also at strengthening the education system so that we create youth who are empowered, who are problem solvers, creative, innovative professionals with the skills for 21st century. In this context, of course, we all know that the government has been taking a lot of interesting and remarkable measures, both on skilling and on education. So the new national education policy, for instance, of 2020, it marks a significant shift towards a very holistic, skill-focused approach to education, which is also aligning with the demands of rapidly evolving global workforce. But on skill development also, as recent as the union budget, most recent one, it's allocated as much as 2 lakh crores to enhance the skill development and employment opportunities for almost 4 crore youth, which is a significant jump. Think of Skill India Mission, think of Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. All these are very important measures, and some of them have actually also shown some positive returns. So, semi-skilled workforce, for instance, has shown some remarkable growth with almost 60% rise as on compound annual growth rate basis between 2017 and 2022, the 5-year period, which is quite a significant positive achievement. But we also know that, from the reports of World Economic Forum and CII, we know that the skill gap in India is significant, running into millions. I also want to highlight, speaking of, we can create, profitable businesses out of responsible business conduct. And that's not a debate that is entirely settled, but I certainly would like panelists and participants to think about it, ask questions, raise their point. But let me stop here. The panelists, all of them very eminent people, have already been well introduced by Tasmita. So I'm, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip the kind of full introduction of panelists, which I hope it's all right. And I'm going to straight jump into some questions that we thought we could ask our panelists to reflect on. As I said, maybe 5 or 6 minutes each. We'll really appreciate. So if I may begin with Dr. Shashi Bala from the Giri National Institute. Dr. Bala, it'll be useful to hear from you on how you perceive the role of the national education policy in bridging India's skill gap, particularly, the informal workforce, and against the rapid technological changes which require such a rapid reskilling and upskilling, which is not always affordable and not always accessible by a large workforce. So what challenges do you see in implementing this, and how do we overcome these challenges? So Dr. Bala, over to you. And thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Dr. Sameer Verma, distinguished fellow. Thank you first for inviting me. My co-panelist, Mr. Atul Mishra, Microsafe Consulting India, Mr. Mandvi Kulshetra from FPS India, and our dear Dr. Partha Pratham Mitra, former Principal Labour and Employment Advisor, Ministry of Labour and Employment. He was our Director General also. It is almost a decade. I don't know, sir remembers also, but we fondly remember his tenure at DD Green National Labour Institute. Thank you, Guts, for connecting on this platform to our DG also. So let me speak to and on the topic that has been given to me, especially the time constraint that you have provided me, 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes. I will try to do justice to that. Straight away focusing on National Education Policy 2020, but it is. I just want to go take you back to first National Education Policy 1986, which has been talking about vocational education from the beginning itself. That was framed keeping into mind the kind of mismatches that we see in the labor market today, and that was seen at that time also. Lot has been done in the recent past to bridge this mismatch. I hope I'm audible. So, which has played a potential role in transformation of India's skill gap, particularly for the informal workforce, if I talk about 2020 National Education Policy, because it's aimed to revamp the education system to better align with the demand of rapidly changing job market. I will just highlight few things in that which is being emphasized by the National Education Policy 2020, that the education system must prepare students for the jobs of future. It is mentioned there in the NEP 2020, which will require a combination of technical skills, problem solving skills, and creativity. It is very much there, and it also it is designed in such a way which will make education more inclusive, flexible, and skill oriented, and these qualities can be leveraged to support the learning need of the informal sector workers, which contributes to a significant portion of the Indian workforce. It has a component called National Credit Framework (NCRF), which was jointly developed by regulators of school skill higher education, which was released during April 2023, which provides framework for accumulation of credit from academic grades, skill program, and relevant experience. It is expected that it will enable multidisciplinary education, lifelong learning, and also recognize the prior learning of cohesion in cohesion with multiple exit entry, which will facilitate establishing equivalence and mobility across stream. Second is National Skill Qualification Framework, which is comprehensive framework that organizes qualifications based on series of level of knowledge, skill, aptitude, which will make easier to align informal sector workers with formal employment and skill certification. For example, a nursery worker who perform various activities outdoor and in a greenhouse such as planting, watering, pruning, and carrying out general care for plants, shrubs, and trees, he can also or she can also monitor the whole process from planting to harvesting. The progression pathway lead to nursery worker to gardener. Next is flexibility through multidisciplinary learning, which with a new and improved learner-centric incentive like National Credit Framework, it allows flexibility of multiple exit and entries, credit-based learning, again academic bank of credit, and the availability of futuristic online and offline courses. India has taken a leap in right direction. This is a very good initiative that has been taken in this policy, which will allow students to get their scores like a digi locker we have. The credit based learning is it has been framed in a similar manner so that the students can score and keep their scores in this National Credit Framework ABC, which we call Academic Bank of Credits. But till date, it has been found it is available for schools, for graduate and higher education. But we need mobility in terms of like they can carry forward their credit if the students are dropping out of 10th class or 12th class, because that is not available right now. If they can carry forward their credit in this, but they cannot carry forward it in case they are dropping out from the schooling system to be part of the active labor market. The next is flexibility on holistic learning and developing a new age curriculum, which calls for creative and multidisciplinary curriculum that education system need to recognize the changing scenario of the job market and offer a curriculum specializing in new age industry specific skill set, which should focus on imparting knowledge and technology and relevant required skills on the foundation built by the education system, especially in the schools. Therefore, schooling should focus on basic requirement of foundation literacy, numeracy, and realization of grade appropriate learning outcome. We also need to focus on vocational education, which is very much there in NEP 2020, which emphasizes integrating vocational education at all level of schooling and aims to provide at least 50% of the students with exposure to vocational skills by 2025. This will significantly help the informal workforce by making skill training more accessible and equitable. Youth with job-ready skills, particularly in trades and craft, commonly associated with the informal economy. And finally, use of technology and digital platform that is really essential. The policy is emphasizing that we should leverage technology for teaching and learning, including through digital platform like SWAM, which offer a wide range of skill-based courses. This could provide the informal workforce with greater access to affordable education, irrespective of geographical limitation. Coming to the challenges that we see in the effective implementation of 2020 policy, there is no mechanism that we have to validate and estimate the training need of different units of the unorganized sector workers that we also call informal sector workers. Workers are either not aware of or deliberately avoid training for the loss of income because they fear that they will be losing their income if they are into training. So NEP has number of challenging tasks which convey multiple crises in the education system. So its effective implementation is critical if India wants to attain demographic dividend, especially that we are facing right now. We should take advantage of the demographic dividend because average age of India right now is 29 years. So we need to focus on infrastructure and resource gap. So implementing of NEP 2020 vision of widespread digital and vocational education requires significant infrastructure, especially in rural and unreserved area. The main challenge is sheer size and diversity of Indian educator sectors, which will be making the task little harder. And Apart from this, the biggest challenge of skill development is that 92% of the workforce is in informal economy. So difficulty in mapping existing skills in unorganized sector and gauge the skilling requirement of this sector. And the rate of job growth in informal sector is estimated to be twice that of informal sector. In fact, the informal sector is now having more of the workers who are on contract basis. So in a way, gradually informal sector is entering the formal sector as well. Then lack of access to training, especially for women and girls, because training opportunities is perceived to be barrier for participation almost by 75 to 50% of the respondent, while physical access to training, especially when we talk about the location access, which is inaccessible to women for personal safety and other reasons that were cited by most of some studies that have been conducted. They have said that when the interviews were conducted, so these were the reasons like safety, mobility, infrastructure, poor and variable quality of available training because people are not aware about the training, the quality of available training is another barrier because we don't have trained trainers. What we can say, we need to invest in the trainers so that constant training is required for the trainers so that we are able to provide quality and updated training, especially when we talk about uh, the present scenario where we are fastly moving toward artificial intelligence and machine learning technology. Uh, I would also like to focus on digital literacy, and I will just sum up on few suggestions that to effectively advocate this, we also need to see the national career service platform that has been wonderful platform for employers to look for the prospective employees and for the employees to look for the prospective employers. But there is a mismatch in terms of, though there is a lot of work is being done, job melas are being organized, but more awareness is needed among the informal sector workers. And we need to have some subsidized training programs, especially for underprivileged sections of the society. And I would like to focus more on financial literacy for the workers, those who are in the informal economy. So to boost the growth and increase the GDP, it is crucial to address the existing skill gap of our workforce. So technical expertise is very essential. So investing in soft skill is also very important apart from investment in the technical skills. It is just like you have learned to drive, but how to drive on the road, that is also very important. So investing in the soft
Thank,
skills is really
thank you.
important. So with this, I would like to give stop to my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bala. I'm very sorry that I'm having to intervene, but
No, I
I know
can.
that
I can understand.
there are experts, and it's just not fair to restrict all of the expertise and experience and knowledge that exists here in the panel to 5 minutes. But we know that we have just about 30 minutes.
Yeah,
So my sincere apologies, and again a request to other
thank
panelists to try and restrict your remarks. I wanted to get back to Sonal Jetli, if I may. Just asking you, so Dr. Bala touched upon the importance of skill identification, upskilling and reskilling as an important requirement going forward. Now we know that in an AI-driven world today, increasingly when we look at future of work and trends in the skills required for workforce, it's rapidly undergoing a change. I remember there was a study by World Economic Forum which said that newer generations will probably need to reskill themselves every 5 or 6 years if they want to remain in the labor force. So, Sonal, if I may ask you, how do you see such skills being imparted at the level of schools? And in that context, if you look at the other side of this equation, which is around innovation hubs, around startups, R&D centers that India is now kind of getting renowned for. How do you see them playing a role in future of work in this country? So again, same request, Sonal, 5-6 minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, sure, Dr. Verma. Thank you so much to you and the CUTS team for inviting us. I would quickly like to just make a few pointers. First, coming to the type of skills that are required in the context of the changing digital economy and how digital has penetrated every aspect of work. So, 90% of job descriptions now have some component of digital, and it's extremely important to have those digital skills. So we will have to devise mechanisms at the policy level, institutional mechanisms that are working aggressively to integrate digital and AI skills and also life skills along with all the cognitive interpersonal skills that are required for students to very seamlessly transition from education to the workforce. So it's no longer optional. It's really essential if we want to realize the economic potential of India and the 5 trillion GDP that we keep talking about. So it's very critical to start imparting those skills and also integrating it with school curriculums at every level, starting from the lowest level. Then when we come to actually job creation, so the positive side of the story is that after India started at this point where we became the global outsourcing or the back office at one point, now we moved up substantially in that value chain, and India is now sort of home to now more than 1,600 global capability centers. These global capability centers are no longer back offices of the world, but they are innovation centers where all the cutting edge products and cutting edge technology is being developed. So we are really now the hub for developing new products, for developing new technology. And the scale of this innovation is really mind blowing because there are research studies that project that this number of 1,600 global capability centers are going to grow up to 2,400 to 3,000 global capability centers that India is going to house maybe till 2030. This has given revenues which was starting at 19 billion, which has now grown to almost 16 billion USD, and projected to grow even further by 2030. It's currently employing close to 1.6 million people. These GCCs are employing 1.6 million people currently, out of which 28% of this workforce is women. And this number of employment by GCCs is going to grow up to 4 million projected by 2030. So why I'm quoting these numbers? Because it's very critical that we be prepared, and we be prepared with the talent and the workforce that will be required to sustain these global capability centers, which are coming up right now, mostly in the tier one cities, but increasingly they will also look at going to other cities. So three levels at which these GCCs are currently contributing to India's future of work is, one is, of course, they are doing a lot of job creation, and it is decent jobs. So it is jobs which are higher up in the skilling value chain, and it's creating decent jobs with the kind of numbers that we're churning out in terms of the young workforce. So India has almost 1.5 million engineers graduating every year, and it has 8.5 million regular graduates every year. So that makes it total of 10 million graduates graduating out of universities every year, and we have this responsibility of ensuring that the economy has enough jobs to absorb this demographic dividend so that it does not become a demographic disaster. And of course, GCCs will play a very critical role at the higher skill level value chain. And also the other critical thing, one is job creation and decent jobs. The second is skill development. So there is a lot of higher order skill upgradation taking force within these GCCs because they need to train their people as well. So that results in a lot of skill development and upgradation in terms of technological skills, product development, AI, and many other skills that are required to drive the digital economy at the cutting edge. The third critical thing they do is a lot of tech transfer and also creation of new knowledge and innovation that is based out of India and that is coming out of India, which also moves India up in the innovation value chain. So our rankings in the Global Innovation Index have been improving. We've improved from 81 in 2015 to now 40 in 2023. And also moving up in the innovation value chain, wherein innovative tech and products are being developed in-house in the country is a very strategic asset for India. So we should look at ways to just enhance this positioning in the innovation value chain. And also the last but most critical thing that these GCCs are doing is that there are a lot of collateral gains when these GCCs develop. So one is in terms of development of a lot of support industries as well in the service sector. So, a GCC would require a lot of other ancillary service providers, whether it's logistics, whether it's legal services, marketing, procurement, other smaller software development services. So, a lot of other collateral gains in terms of supporting and other ancillary service industries coming up. Also, a lot of collaboration with the startup ecosystem. Which also results in creation of a larger ecosystem that can create and provide jobs by being more successful and profitable. And the second most important thing, which is a collateral gain, is also expansion of capabilities, infrastructure in tier two towns and cities, because currently we see these GCCs are mostly focused around Bangalore, Mumbai, Delhi, and other of these top metro cities, but they're increasingly looking at going to tier two cities like Coimbatore, like Vadodara and others, wherein the real estate cost is cheaper. Infrastructure is, matching some of the larger cities. Ahmedabad is also one of them. And also, the responsibility here will be to ensure that how do we use and leverage the GCCs to, also go out to tier two cities and create the skills that they require to employ more and more people in these cities. So I will stop there, Dr. Verma, and open to any more questions.
Sonal, thank you very much. I think it was extremely crisp and very, very precise
Thank you.
response, and the way you highlighted the role of global capability centers, some of which I was not myself aware of, I must admit, which I think is phenomenal. So thank you for bringing that to the attention of everybody. I'm quickly going to move on to Dr. Mitra. Thank you, sir, for your time and for joining us. You've been responsible for a lot of employment and labor policies in this country for more than 35 years, being a senior bureaucrat in the government of India. So let me take this opportunity to ask you, sir, your own reflections on, the recent union budget, for instance, which has enhanced and allocated the funds, huge funds for skill development and employment. How do you think such initiative will benefit employment and labor situation in this country? And I would also like to particularly request your reflection on the collaboration with the private sector, some of which I think will draw on what Sonal has already spoken about. But your own reflections will be very, very useful. We only have 20 minutes, so I'm just going to request again panelists to just self-discipline in whatever way you can, and we'll truly appreciate. So, Dr. Mitra, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Verma. Am I audible?
Ji, bilkul.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Cuts, also for giving me this opportunity to participate in this very important and thematic webinar. Yes, the budget has tried to make a dent in the skill topography and the employment overall, because you will have to understand the complete perspective and the overall view of the budget. If you notice, the government has been actually doing a kind of an investment pump prime kind of policy in terms of building infrastructure, and then also emphasizing on the livelihoods part of it. Now, both have to go parallel. So once you do the investment pump prime, we are expecting jobs to grow. But then jobs will not automatically come unless you have skilled manpower. And that is where I think this huge investment of 2 lakh crore, which you have mentioned, which focuses on the modernization of ITIs and also incentivizing the private sector to create jobs in terms of giving rebates and reliefs for the provident fund payments, both to the employers and the employees. The 3 schemes have been announced. Apart from that, you have a very novel internship scheme, 5 crores in the next, 1 crore in the next 5 years, and you're getting 5,000 rupees a month. So internship is, my studies have reflected that internship is a necessary prerequisite for any kind of, exposure to the on-the-job training, because we talk of, lack of employability. I mean, we have graduates coming out, but they are not employable. The simple reason is that these young, bright people are not getting an opportunity to kind of interact with the industry. So this exposure is likely to be very handy. And I think we only hope that the interns then graduate and then get absorbed in the workforce. I think this is one very important step which the government has taken. But in the overall context, if you see the track record, the PMKVY, as far as data is there, I think it has created about 1.45 crores 5 crore jobs from 2015. And the plan is to create 4 crore jobs in the next 5 years. So it's a tall order. Let me tell you that it's a tall order, given the fact that about 1.2 million people join the workforce every year. So almost, 1 crore people, fresh entrants coming to the workforce. So naturally, the job creation has to go up. Yes, the larger part of the employment scenario, if you see 52% or 53% of them are all self-employed. Naturally, when there are jobs not forthcoming, self-employed, they have to kind of earn a living. But then decent jobs are going up, but maybe the pace at which we would like to grow is not happening. But I think the budget gives the right signals, because you see, if you notice, we have a subsidy driven economy. Whether you talk of the PLI, whether you talk of the other the investment or the incentive scheme, they're essentially subsidy driven. So employment has also taken that path. We hope that the private sector responds. In fact, the 50,000 crores which the government has earmarked for the modernization of ITIs, you're talking of the private sector. 30,000 crores is coming from the center, 10,000 crores from the state, and 10,000 crores the private sector will have to, invest. So that is where I think the private-public partnership is going to happen. And unless there is this PPP model, which is kind of going in, say it's not exactly kind of trotting, but it's limping, I would say. That has to kind of get energized, because you see, if the ITIs are not run by these private institutions, although they have the governing bodies, they have the private sector, but private sector is very choosy. They will take people from the ITIs provided it meets their requirements. If you notice, these clusters, they have all important industrial clusters have ITIs. But these ITIs are essentially, to meet the captive requirements of the industry, which is okay. Fine. But unfortunately, what has happened is the national apprentice scheme, which NAPS, which was the figures shows that we have only created about 36 odd lakh job, trainees, which they would like will get absorbed as apprenticeships and then move on and graduate as workforce. So the numbers are not very encouraging given the dimensions. Given the huge backlog we have of creating jobs. But I think the government has taken the right step in giving these signals, and we hope that the private sector responds. In the overall context of the global economy, we have to move towards a 5 trillion economy. We have mixed signals around the globe with, Europe slowing down and US and China constantly fighting and being an election year this year. So all these global trends are going to affect our industry, but then we have a vast domestic market. Unfortunately, the consumption trends are not kind of showing much encouragement. As I said earlier, that the investment pump priming will have to happen. Investments, when they grow, when we have the infrastructure, the trigger effect, the spin-off effect will be on jobs. That is the hope. And then the skilling part will kind of complement the entire process so that we have a skilled manpower. But on the question of AI and machine learning, which the earlier panelists were alluding to, let me tell you that if you see the skill ladder or the pyramid in this country, you will notice that there's a huge base, of kind of unemployed youth or partially employed youth with very little skills. And then you have a very sharp pyramid with all the top IIMs, IITs, and all they're kind of jostling with each other with kind of high wage islands. So we have a very kind of an unequal structure in the wages, which is reflective of the unequal economic, the inequalities which are getting created in this system, So the access to, I've always felt that the access to better learning, better skills has to be ensured. So long as we don't ensure the access, the poor, the bottom of the pyramid people are not going to kind of go up the skills ladder, It is through individual efforts that are going to go. That is where I think the role of the state becomes very important, and also the private sector will have to chip in if they are looking for the skilled workforce. And if, as the earlier panelists have said, our demographic dividend does not turn into a demographic nightmare, we need to really intervene and see that the iniquitous structure is kind of redressed and the poor get an access to the new trends, the new education policy, which brings in so much of flexibility. All that accessibility has to improve. I think this is where I'll stop and I will be open to questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Verma. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dr. Mitra. Truly appreciate your extremely vast area that you covered in a matter of just about 5.5 minutes, which I so much appreciate, and it speaks to the extensive experience of direct policy making that you've had. I'll quickly move on to our last, but certainly not the least, panelist, Ms. Mandvi Kulshresht. And in some ways, I think it's very opportune that you come in last, because as a program officer, and I've been one, so I know that the advantage that you have is to actually be a part of all these changes and yet be able to kind of see them from at a distance. So from where you are, Mandvi, if I may ask you, specifically, as Dr. Mitra mentioned about the pyramid of inequality that exists with semi-skilled, large number of low and semi-skilled at the bottom and high-skilled, very few jobs at the top. If we are to move on the decent job ladder, we clearly need to change this pyramid. We have to have more people who are skilled at the top. How do we do this? What are what suggestions would you have, Mandvi, for all of us?
That's a tough question, really. But thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm not as esteemed as the other, and as experienced as the other panelists. But thank you for including me. It's a privilege, and Kats is a long-term partner, so it's always interesting to join these sessions. Actually, the questions that were given to us. Says I have switched to another language.
Yes, sorry, Manvi. You could actually speak to the question, which is not very different.
No.
How do we?
No,
How do we get?
No, it is good that you asked this question, because when the questions I got, I was like, this is. I mean, this is exactly what I'm not going to speak on, because the questions were heavy on how to make how to ensure that the productivity of the industry, or how the industry demands are met. And my entire take, because FES, it's a social justice based think tank. I mean, we work on those values. I think for me, the point is not how industry will grow, but how the humans will grow. So where is the human development in all of this? So where is the how are we ensuring that education helps in human development or human growth? That would be my primary and central proposition. And thank you then for asking this question, because I would have said no, say no to industry growth. We all need the GDP, but really that couldn't be our focus. Anyway, so no, it is good that I came in class, because the speakers, and they have more experience, in terms of what the NEP offers, or what are the different programs and stuff. I would like to say, and this was really rightly pointed out by Shashi Balaji, that NEP or any RD for that matter, they focus more on preparing students for jobs. So the entire focus of education is mostly on preparing, employable people or professionals for jobs, and I think this is where I differ entirely. For me, education is more like, or education or any kind of skilling should actually provide more power to the people. And in earlier time, it was seen, education was more seen as a social good, or something that will help you grow as individuals, and that character you then bring to nation building. And right now, what we see is that education is more of an economic input, where you are preparing, you're actually preparing a workforce from the kindergarten itself, and then the path is mostly derived by how the industry would like to see it. And I think this has to change. This fundamental shift has to take place. This paradigm shift, unless this takes place, I don't think we'll be able to, invert that pyramid and see that there are more skilled people on the top, and on the highly skilled levels. Because I mean, how would you ensure otherwise that these skilling programs, they are attuning themselves to the changing realities of today? I mean, I also work a lot on climate change and energy transition, and you see that more and more we are demanding for, say, green jobs or decent jobs. There are political compulsions. There are climate change related environmental compulsions. So a system, an education system, which is very set in how the industry should grow in a certain manner, cannot accommodate these fluctuating realities. So that education system has to be itself very agile, I would say, and also very flexible. You can't have like a definitive, conclusive kind of a curriculum where you say, okay, this is what you have to go through the entire life learning cycle. But there has to be an agility built in, which keeps on factoring in the changing environment, factoring in the changing political environment, and also then it also gives the students or the trainee the ability to keep thinking on their toes. Otherwise, you're just like learning to read and write, and probably this is how India would also accomplish its. I don't know if we have like a 100% gross enrollment target in 2030. This is to be set within the SDGs. But if one wants to achieve that, I mean, it would just mean that every one of us is literate and writing and reading. But the kind of skills you would require probably in the future is more like analytical in nature, more creative in nature, where you can actually go beyond the usual drudgery of being in, I don't know, being a data entry person. So I mean, all I'm trying to say is that education itself has to think, and probably NEP has tried to do it because it also forms itself on the basis of the values of equity, inclusion, participation. But then I think there is one step more missing there, where it has to offer things in a way that they are more responsive to the present realities. I will stop at that.
Sorry, there's one correction. I mentioned 50,000 crores. Actually, 60,000 crores for modernization of the ITIs, of which 30,000 will come from the center, 20 from the states, and 10 from the private sector. So that makes it 6,000 crores. 1,000 ITIs are going to be modernized. That is in the budget.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We truly appreciate again not only your timekeeping but also a range of issues, and from the perspective where you sit, being able to see how the partners are working, not just one organization but several partners that you're kind of engaging with are working on these issues. So we have 4 minutes left before 4:30, but I believe I saw a message from Sanchita where we could. Well, Cuts is very happy to extend the session by another 15 minutes, go up to 4:45, but I need to know particularly from the panelists, if they are okay with this, and certainly from the participants. This is a conversation which is only warming up, if I may put it that way. There's so much more to discuss. But I hope, is it okay if you can just raise your hand to show that it's okay to go for 15 more minutes? Yeah. Perfect. Great. I can't see Dr. Bala, but I hope it's okay with you, ma'am. So thank you very much. Let's pick up a few questions from this from the panelists, and I'm going to ask participants to. Well, there are quite a few questions coming up as I'm speaking, and I'm wondering if it's better for me to read out the questions or ask participants to talk about it. I would much prefer participants to raise their hand and speak about it, provided they remain disciplined and don't give, please forgive me for saying this, don't give a lecture of 5 minutes. Please ask your question in a very pointed way, 30 seconds. If you can do that, please raise your hands. I'll be very happy to invite you. Else, put your question on the chat box and we'll make sure that we attend to it. If not today, then at some other time. So who goes first?
Yes, if I may. My name is Mihir Bhosle. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, please.
So I'm an assistant policy with Cuts International. So I'll be very brief. My question is to Dr. Bala. She talked about the National Education Policy 2020, which is reported to have drawn inspiration from Germany's educational system. So, in her opinion, or in the esteemed panelist's opinion, how does Germany's approach to workforce skilling compare to India's? And what lessons India might learn from Germany's model in this regard? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know that there are two other hands. So Tasmita, if it's okay, I'm going to ask you to wait because let non-cuts participant first speak and then we can get into
Sure, sir.
our colleagues
Sure.
from. I hope that's all right with you, Tasmita.
Sure, sir.
Great. I don't know if Vidisha Sadhu is the other person I see. Does she also belong to cuts? Forgive me for not knowing this. If you're not part of cuts, please go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Actually, sir, all the three hands which have been raised are from cuts. But I guess we have one non-cuts participant in the chat box, Devanjali Bishwas. So she can
So,
go first.
okay. So Devanjali, are you okay to unmute yourself and ask your question? Or else I'm going to ask Tasmita to read up though. I'm not able to. That's okay. No problem at all. Tasmita, can you just read out the question
Sure, sir.
for all
Sure.
of us?
So she writes, government's internship scheme has big aspirations to give 1 crore Indians internships over 5 years across 500 companies. Are there any logistical concerns about how many companies will accommodate the large volume of interns? Do you think this initiative to skill will solve or somewhat alleviate the issue of rising unemployment born out of not enough jobs to meet the supply? Or does it risk becoming redundant? Also, what are some of the efforts that can be taken or have been taken by the government or by the corporates to promote job creation? Yeah.
Thank you, Tasmita. I also see a question from Professor Paramaselvam. My apologies, the chat disappeared.
Yeah, I can see, sir. He wrote, will the gross enrollment ratio improve with National Education Policy 2020?
Oh my God, who wants to take this? Okay. Okay, as we wait for other people, and I'm kind of going to prioritize questions from non-cuts colleagues in the first instance. So as people think about questions, I'm going to invite panelists to respond to a few unresponded questions because I think several of the questions have already been responded to on the chat box.
I think there are some questions from non-cuts in the chat box. If they can just go ahead and unmute themselves and ask their questions.
Thank you, Sanjita.
Or else I would like to read them out. I've pointed out some.
Okay. Okay, so Tasmita, I'm going to depend on you to help me out with the questions on chat box.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I know that you had a question. I also know that somebody else, Vidisha, I think from Cuts had a question. So why don't you two also raise the question? Raise your questions, please.
Okay, so Bidisha, would you like to go first?
My
Yes, we
question,
can hear you, Vidisha. Please go ahead.
my question is to Malvi ma'am. Then, in your opinion, how can educational institutions and industries and policymakers work together to align skill development with the evolving demands of technology and automation?
Okay, Mandvi, I hope it's okay. I'm just going to request panelists to hold on. Let's have a round of questions and then you can respond together. I see Vaswati Rudrapal having raised her hand. Could I request you to please unmute
Yes,
yourself and ask?
yes,
Thank
am I
you.
audible?
Yes, you are.
Yes, my question is to Mr. Pathpratim Mitra. So I want to ask that there is a persistent problem of skill gap that we all acknowledge in India. What are the policy interventions that can be taken from the regulator's point of view, be the government or the educational institutions, and also how can India, the workforce itself and the industry can prepare its workforce to adapt to this tech-driven future?
Okay. Tasmita, you had a question as well?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please.
So my question is open to all. So there are many programs and schemes existing in India, and lot were already discussed in today's discussion for skilling and providing vocational training. So despite there being an implementation problem, and another issue which I have also been reading a lot is that industry people, especially in India, think that investing in human capital formation goes somewhat against their prime motive of profit maximization. So, how can this thought be changed? And does ESG, environment, social governance, act as an effective tool in bringing progress towards workers' welfare through skill development with respect to Indian companies?
Great. Thank you, Tasmita. You anticipated the question that I had for the panelists. Kind of referred to in my opening remarks about successful business being responsible business. But thank you for elaborating that question. I certainly would be very keen to learn from the panelists. So I'm going to hold on to any more questions and request the participants to think if you have any more questions the next 5 minutes, as I invite panelists to please respond in to any question that you feel you would like to respond to. We'll go in reverse order. So Mandavi, you first.
Okay, thank you so much. I think to the question from Vidisha, I mean, there are many forms of collaborations existing right now as well. But I think what has to be done rigorously is because the government usually doesn't have the capacity or either resources or the wherewithal to ensure that there is enough collaboration or enough let's say concurrent or market driven intervention. We definitely need private money and private sector taking more role in creating the infrastructure that is required. I mean, we see that at the senior secondary level that government schools don't perform as much as the private schools do, and they also have the infrastructure is there. They are better with their performance indicators. They are better with their student teacher ratio. So I think at the vocational or skill development stage as well, you need to require more and more private sector intervention. I mean, that is how it would also, address the responsible capitalism part. The ESG, in my very honest opinion, it's more of a shareholder optic than really a stakeholder optic. Uh, it's mostly something that goes into the reports and where you just check some boxes. But yes, if you're truly thinking of becoming a responsible uh, company or a responsible industry, then education is primarily where you would need to invest, apart from the green and the social part. Um, there was a question on German and India, how India can learn from the German system. I think what has been done successfully in the German education system is that they give a lot of focus. They have been giving a lot of focus on vocational educations. Beginning, it isn't a deviation, but it is kind of integrated within their secondary and senior secondary school system. And also the big factor there is that there is dignity to what you are learning. So if you're becoming a plumber or an electrician or a carpenter and all, that dignity of job is maintained, and this is what our system fails to do. So I think if one has to see how best we can adopt their system, then yeah, again it is coming from a value of compassion and understanding that has to be considered. But presently, what Germany is also facing is a lack of, because they are very good with traditional industries, solar, especially the RE and stuff, and automobile, etc. What they are struggling right now is the new age industries like tech, IT, and this is where they're also seeking support from India. They have the Skill Immigration Act where they would take away a lot of Indian brains to Germany so that their IT and tech industry is supported. So I think as much as we look forward to the German system, the Germans are also looking, towards us to provide the IT skill workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Mandvi, for a very interesting perspective, which I think is important to keep in mind. businesses happens at all levels. I think it's important to keep that in mind. So, Dr. Mitra, sir, any quick reflections from you on any question that you thought you might like to share a few perspectives on?
See, there was this question about employability, whether and how far is the youth employable in India, and why is there a skill mismatch? I think we have to look at from the perspective of both industry and the skill levels that are that are currently obtaining in the country. Some data about employability index says that our graduates, I think the percentage was about 32, 33% couple of years back, 2016, 17. Now it has gone up to 52%. In other words, it is becoming more employable. But then this challenge between, the employability and the youth not getting fully trained is going to be there unless, the entire education system is overhauled and industry kind of makes it more relevant. I mean, it's a more relevant both in terms of its social responsibility of kind of extending what it requires. Very often I find that, the industry kind of raises some kind of an alibi to say that, look, enough is enough. Our industry is a recession. We won't be able to take more people. So that's, I've seen that happening. But be that as it may, the skill shortage definitely is there, particularly at the higher levels, particularly where things like AI, all these factors are coming in. And people and the youth will certainly stand up to this challenge. But then the numbers are really daunting. If you have to train up all of them with technical skills, it's going to be an issue. And moreover, the existing manpower also needs to get constantly, upskilled. Gone are the days when I had learned something in my college and then the rest of my life, I kind of work on it. Gone are those days. I think the upskilling thing is reskilling or whatever way you call it is constantly there, for which we need to provide access and also have the will to learn. While the will to learn is always there, but accessibility is an issue. So till these broader social equity issues are kind of resolved, I don't see this happening overnight. Although the skill mismatch thing is going to kind of remain there, but then once the industry picks up, I think industry on its own will come and kind of, invest in manpower. As I think Tasmita did mention about whether they would like to kind of go into this, human resource development and not go into profit making. But then, without having a proper human, it has always, the research has shown that unless you have a well-trained manpower, your industry will not kind of grow. So it is in the interest of industry to kind of have a skilled manpower. So this issue is going to remain there, but I think the signals are there from the government side to kind of push the industry to kind of accept the challenge and go ahead. As I said, the modernization of the ITIs is one way. Involving the private sector is another way of kind of making the training the relevant to the needs of the industry, because the industry has to tell what it needs. It's no point in saying that I don't have skilled manpower. I don't get that. They have to tell us and they have to participate in the skill building process, which I think they also realize, and the government is also kind of nudging them to do that. So I think both. I think it's a joint collaboration, as I would say.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Mitra. So Sonal and Dr. Bala, 1 minute each. No pressure. It's only if you feel like responding to any questions. But please, 1 minute each.
I had just responded through chat also, but there were a lot of questions pertaining to German education system. But as has been said by my previous four panelists, that we are also learning from them and they are also learning from India. The Germany
Right.
system of education and the Indian system of education these days are learning from each other. But India has been doing it since ages. Like we had the system of hereditary skills that are being passed from one generation to next generations that are now being formalized. But we have wonderful thing that is called Apprenticeship Act 1961, if I'm not wrong. We need to rework on that. in current framework also, so that we are
Yes,
able to focus on the job training part more effectively. So
that's
that,
right. You know,
yeah,
yes,
and
yes. It's
that will be
union
policy.
budget is, yeah,
Yes.
union budget is provincial. So no, no, thank you, Dr. Bala. Sorry, I'm kind of my apologies. I must give a chance also to Sonal, who's been keeping quiet and
Yes.
waiting for her turn. Sonal, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Verma. I see one question. I have responded to other, but I see there is one question on how do we compare to other emerging economies in terms of upskilling. So, first of all, I refrain from comparing India to any other economy because just given our sheer size, I think we're not a country, we are a subcontinent. So, very difficult to compare us to anyone. But I think many countries in the subcontinent are trying, but we really have to, given the sheer size and scale that we really have to accelerate, and we have a lot more to do to accelerate skilling for our workforce. For example, Vietnam has done very well to, come up with this entire becoming a global hub for textiles. Bangladesh has done that. If you see the European Union, they are coming up. They've used this Digicom framework, which is a digital skills framework adopted for the first time to assess by any sort of country to assess the digital skilling needs of its citizens, which is very very critical because we also lack data on what is required, what kind of skilling is required, and that is multi-layered. So skilling is required at different levels. So that data is also missing. So something like Digicom, which the EU is using, could also be very helpful. So yeah, a lot of work ahead of us on all aspects. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sonal. We are at time, so I'm not going to request for any more extensions. It will not be fair. So let me just conclude by thanking all the eminent panelists and also uh, acknowledging that I know it's not fair to ask you to talk and share your experience and vast knowledge in 5 or 7 minutes each. But in the interest of time, I think all of you did a commendable job, and I'm very grateful for your contribution, for your cooperation on this. There's a lot of areas that have been touched upon. I mean, truly vast. And I'm sure all of us from Cuts will take a lot of time to kind of just get our heads around. But I particularly thank also the participants for raising an amazing set of questions, because these give us new pointers to what is it that we need to think about as we do our work in undertaking the research that we do. I just wanted to share one last very personal thought on education and skill. I have always seen education as a public good, whereas skill is not. And I think that's something which I've always preferred to keep in mind when we are thinking about education and skill in the context of empowering growth. A lot of our values get derived from the way we see education versus skill. Not every education needs to be skill directed. Some education has an intrinsic value. It must remain so. So, many things to discuss, but thank you again. I also thank my colleagues at Cuts. It's, these kind of conversations to wrap it up in 1 hour, 1 hour, 15 minutes is not easy. But great job, all of you. And thank you again. My best wishes for a wonderful evening and afternoon, wherever you are. Over to Sanchita and Tasmita.
Thank you, Samar. I don't know why your name is coming as Ananya Verma, but we are okay if you have changed your name. Thank you so much for skillfully facilitating the discussion and, for bringing up really great issues. We thank our panelists, Dr. Shashi Bala, Mr. Partha Pratim Mitra, Ms. Sonal Jetli, and Ms. Manvi Kushishtra for being here today, enriching the discussion. Whenever we organize something like this, a webinar, we are always in a dilemma, how much time to keep? Because what if there are no questions? And then, then the, discussions don't advance. But I'm so happy to see that there was so much participation, not just from Cuts colleagues, but also from non-cuts participants. I would also like to thank my team, Tasmita, Deepmala, Pratyush, and Samaranjay, as well as Varidhi, Akshay, Yamini, and our IT team. Because, as you know, any such event is not a one person's job. And we will continue discussing these issues. Future of work is an important area of work for CUTS. And we intend to take up different strands of work, maybe more specialized, more focused. And of course, things like education skills, innovation will be kind of like permanent fixture in any discussion on future of work, and we intend to carry this on. So thank you so much. We are again like 10 minutes over the time, and thank you to everybody for being so patient with us. Okay, bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you
you.
so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.